I still don't sleep right. It's been 3 years and I'll be lying in bed at some normal hour and out of nowhere my whole body goes cold. Not scared exactly, just cold. Like the temperature drops 20 degrees inside my own skin. And I know what it is. It's that 1 second. The one where the world went quiet before it went loud. People ask me about it sometimes. When they find out I was there, they lean in like they want a movie. And I never know how to start because the truth is, for the first hour I didn't even know anything was wrong. I was just a tired guy from Ohio standing on a sidewalk in London, complaining about my feet. So let me start there, with my feet, because that's the honest beginning. It was the last week of June. The summer my marriage was either going to be saved or buried, and we'd flown to London to find out which. That sounds dramatic, I know. But Marie and I had been circling each other for a year like two people who'd forgotten why they ever met, and somebody, I think it was her sister, said go somewhere neither of you has been. Make new memories instead of fighting over old ones. So we went to London, and the first 2 days it actually worked. We held hands on the tube. We laughed at the price of a sandwich. We did the touristy stuff and didn't roll our eyes at each other once. The third morning, that was the day. June 28th. I'll never forget the date now even though I forget everybody's birthday. It was hot, which surprised me because everybody warns you London is gray and drizzly, but that week there was a heat wave, and the whole city felt like it was holding its breath under a thick wool blanket. The pavement gave off heat. People walked slower. The flowers along the park were almost too bright, like somebody had turned up the color. We planned to walk through Hyde Park down toward the palace. Marie wanted to see the guards, the real ones, the ones in the red coats and the tall black hats, standing still as statues while tourists made fools of themselves trying to get a reaction. She'd seen them on TV when she was a little girl, and she'd had this idea in her head ever since that they weren't real men, that they were almost like part of the building. They can't be human, she said over breakfast. Nobody can stand that still. They're soldiers, I told her. It's a job. Still, I want to see one up close. And I want you to remember that. Because of all the dumb little things we said that morning over cold eggs and burnt toast, that was the one that mattered. She wanted to see a guard up close. We had no idea. We got to Hyde Park around 11, maybe a little after. I remember because a church bell somewhere was finishing its run and I counted it without meaning to. The park was packed. School groups in matching shirts, joggers with that look like they hated every step, old couples on benches sharing one newspaper, a guy near the Serpentine selling ice cream out of a cart, and a line for it that wrapped around twice. It felt like the safest place on earth. That's what gets me. It was the kind of day where nothing bad is supposed to be allowed in. Sunshine like that almost feels like a promise. We stopped near a stand of big plane trees, those ones with the patchy bark like they're peeling out of an old coat, and Marie was taking pictures of the flowers. I was standing there pretending to be patient. My feet hurt because I'd worn the wrong shoes, new ones, leather, the kind that look great and feel like punishment. I kept shifting my weight back and forth. And that's when I noticed the man. Now I want to be careful here because afterward everybody acts like they felt something was wrong. Like they had a sixth sense. I don't believe most of that. I didn't feel anything mystical. I just noticed a man because he didn't fit, the way you notice one piano key that's out of tune even if you can't read music. He was standing about 30 feet away near a green metal trash bin. He had a backpack, big one. Hiking style, the kind with the metal frame, way too much bag for a guy just walking through a city park. And it was the heat that made him stand out, really. Everybody was in t-shirts and shorts. He was in a long dark jacket, zipped to the throat in 90-degree weather. He was sweating. I could see it from where I stood. His face had that wet shine, and he kept wiping his upper lip with the back of his hand. I figured he was sick. That was my honest first thought. Poor guy's got a fever, he's out walking it off, none of my business. I looked away. Marie was showing me a photo of a rose. "Look how perfect," she said. "Beautiful," I said, not looking. When I looked back at the man, he'd moved. He was standing right next to the trash bin now, and he set the backpack down beside it. Just set it on the ground, real gentle, the way you'd put down something that could break. Then he straightened up and started walking. Not fast, not slow, just walking away with his hands jammed in his jacket pockets and his head down. And he left the bag there. I'm not going to pretend I understood. I didn't. I thought that idiot forgot his bag. I almost called out. I genuinely almost shouted, "Hey, mate, your bag," because I'd picked up mate from the locals and was very proud of it. Something stopped me, I don't know what. Maybe the way he didn't look back. People who forget things look back. They feel that itch. He didn't. He walked like a man who was very deliberately not looking at something. And once I noticed that, I couldn't unnotice it. "Marie," I said, "hold on." She kept clicking pictures. "Marie." "What?" She finally looked up annoyed, and I think my face must have done something because her annoyance dropped off in about half a second. "What's wrong?" "That bag," I said. "That guy left that bag." She looked, and she did the thing everybody does, she shrugged. "Maybe he's coming back." "He's not coming back." "You don't know that." I didn't know that. She was right. But I knew it the way you know a thing in your gut before your brain catches up and starts arguing. Here's where I have to tell you about the guard. Because this whole time, 20 yards the other direction, near a little ornamental gate that led toward the palace grounds, there was a royal guard at his post. He wasn't one of the big ceremonial ones at the front of the palace with the crowds. This was a side position, a working post, the kind people don't photograph because there's nothing pretty around it, just a gate, a strip of gravel, and a small sentry box that needed a coat of paint. He'd been there the whole time. I'd half-registered him the way you register a lamppost. Red tunic. The tall hat, I learned later, they're called bearskins, and they're heavier than they look, and in that heat it must have been like wearing an oven on your head. White belt, rifle held against his shoulder. And he was doing the thing Marie couldn't believe. He wasn't moving, not a twitch. Sweat was running down the side of his face. I could see it catch the light, and he didn't wipe it. Didn't blink that I could tell. A kid had been standing in front of him for 10 minutes making faces, and the guard might as well have been carved out of stone. Marie had wanted to see one up close. Well, there he was. And I remember thinking, even in the middle of my worry about the bag, I remember thinking, that's the loneliest looking job in the world. To stand perfectly still in a crowd of thousands of people, all of them moving and laughing and living, and you're not allowed to be one of them. You're a wall with a heartbeat. I didn't know yet that he'd already seen the man, the one with the bag. I didn't know that those eyes that looked frozen had been tracking that backpack for several minutes before I ever noticed it. He'd clocked the jacket, the sweat, the size of the bag, the way the man's hands kept going to his pockets. He'd seen all of it from his post, and he hadn't moved a muscle because that's the discipline. You don't break the line, you don't cause a panic, you radio it in and you hold. He'd held. While my whole worry was still just a bad feeling in my stomach, he'd already done his job in his head, and he was waiting for the response. I learned all that later. In the moment, all I saw was a statue in a red coat. "I'm gonna find somebody," I told Marie. "Find who?" "A cop, security, somebody." For a backpack, she wasn't mocking me. She was scared a little now, and when Marie gets scared, she gets logical, almost stubborn about it, like if she can argue the danger down to something small, it'll have to obey her. "It's a park, people leave bags. You'll look crazy." "Then I'll look crazy." I started walking. Not toward the guard. I didn't think a guard would help. I figured he wasn't a real cop just for show. I started toward where I thought I'd seen a couple of police community officers earlier, those ones in the lighter uniforms who mostly give directions. My heart was going. I had this stupid embarrassment thing happening at the same time as the fear, like part of my brain was already rehearsing the apology, sorry, false alarm, just a nervous American. I got maybe 15 steps before everything changed. There was a noise behind me, not the bag, people. A cluster of voices going up all at once, the sound a crowd makes when something catches their attention, that rising murmur. I turned around. The man had come back. He was walking back toward the bag, faster now, and his hand was out of his pocket and he was holding something, and I couldn't see what it was, but the way he was holding it, low, tight against his hip, half hidden by his jacket, turned my blood to ice water. Some part of the animal brain just knows. You don't need to identify the object. The posture does it for you. And here's the part I will swear to until the day I die. Because 3 different other people swore to the same thing later, and the cameras backed it up. The guard moved. That statue, that painted wall of a man, he came off his post like he'd been fired from it. 1 second he was a frozen red figure, and the next he was running full sprint, rifle coming down, bearskin hat flying off his head and tumbling on the gravel behind him, and he was screaming. Not a word I caught at first, just a roar. The crowd was already starting to scatter without knowing why, the way a flock of birds lifts off a wire all at once, and the guard was cutting straight through them, toward the man, toward the bag. I froze. I'm not proud of it. Everybody likes to imagine they'd be a hero, but most of us just freeze, and I froze. Marie grabbed the back of my shirt. The man with the bag heard the guard coming. He turned, and for 1/2 second the two of them locked eyes across maybe 40 feet of grass and gravel, the guard sprinting flat out, and the man with whatever was in his hand, and I thought, he's not going to make it. The guard's not going to make it in time. That's when the other men appeared. They came from everywhere, that's how it felt. Like the park itself opened up and produced them. Dark gear, helmets, weapons up and braced against their shoulders, moving in that low, fast crouch you only see in movies. 4 of them, then more behind. Shouting, loud, hard voices in a rhythm that wasn't panic, it was training, it was a drill made real. Armed police. Get down, get down, get down. Later I'd learn what they were. An armed response unit. Counter-terror. The kind of officers most people in England never see in their whole lives because they're kept back out of sight until the one day they're needed. Where I'm from, we'd call them SWAT. To me, in that moment, they were just the scariest, fastest, most welcome thing I'd ever seen, all at once. And here's the thing nobody could have planned for. Here's the thing that, when I tell people, they always make me repeat. The guard and the armed officers were both running for the same man, from 2 different directions. And in the chaos, the screaming crowd, the heat shimmer off the grass, the hat tumbling, the dark jacket, the guard's own rifle in his hands. One of the armed officers saw the running figure with the weapon, and he had a fraction of a second to make a decision, and he made the only one his training would let him make. He didn't see a guard. He saw a man running full speed toward a possible device, holding a rifle, not in uniform from the chest down because he'd already half-stripped his outer tunic in the sprint. I found out later he'd torn at it because the heat was killing him, and it was caught on his rifle strap, and screaming. The officer didn't know it was the guard. He took him down. I saw it happen, and my brain refused it. It was like watching 2 pieces of a puzzle that don't go together being forced into the same spot. The armed officer hit the guard at a dead run, shoulder into his side, and the 2 of them went down hard onto the gravel in a tangle of red and black. The guard's rifle skidded away. Somebody's knee came down on the back of his neck. More officers piled in, weapons trained, the shouting tripling, "Don't move, don't move." And the guard was face down in the dirt with his cheek pressed into the gravel and his arms wrenched behind him. For 1 horrible second, I thought they were going to shoot him. I genuinely did. I had my hand over Marie's eyes without even deciding to. And the guard, God, this is the part that breaks me. Even now, the guard wasn't fighting them. He could have. He was strong, young, he'd been running like a freight train. But the moment he hit the ground and felt the gear and heard the words "armed police," Some part of him understood exactly what had happened, that his own side had him, that in the fog of it he'd become the suspect. And instead of fighting, instead of screaming, "I'm a guard, I'm one of you," which is what I'd have done, which is what anybody would have done. He turned his head, cheek in the gravel, and he yelled 3 words. The bag, the bag. Over and over, not "let me up," not "you've got the wrong man." He didn't waste one breath on himself. The bag, check the bag. And he kept jerking his chin toward the trash bin, toward the backpack the real man had set down, because the real man, in all the chaos, with every eye and every weapon suddenly pointed at the guy in the red coat being slammed into the dirt. The real man was getting away. I want to stop here for a second, because I've thought about this more than anything else in my life. That guard had every reason in that moment to think about himself. He had armed men on top of him, a knee on his neck. He was being treated like the very thing he'd spent that whole boiling hot morning watching for. Any of us would have spent those seconds fighting to clear our own name. It's the most human instinct there is. No, no, you've got it wrong, it's not me. He didn't. He used the only seconds he had pinned, helpless, maybe a breath from being shot by mistake, to point at the real threat, to finish the job he'd started when he came off that post. I think about what kind of training or what kind of person lets you do that, to not even reach for your own safety, to stay on mission while your face is in the dirt. Marie was crying. I didn't even notice until later. She had my arm in a grip that left marks. And somewhere in the scattering crowd, a man in a long dark jacket was walking. Not running, walking, because running draws eyes away from us all, toward the trees, toward the open park, with everyone's attention nailed to the wrong place. I was the only one looking at him, me and one other person. The guard, with his cheek in the gravel, was looking too. Our eyes didn't meet. But we were both watching the same back disappear into the same crowd, and I think we both had the exact same thought at the exact same time. He's getting away, and nobody knows. That's when I did the only thing I've ever done in my life that I'm actually proud of. I let go of Marie. I stepped out toward the nearest armed officer, the one who wasn't on the pile, the one standing rear guard with his weapon sweeping the crowd, and I pointed with my whole arm at the man in the jacket, and I screamed with everything I had, in a voice I didn't recognize as my own. That's HIM, dark jacket running to the trees, that's HIM. The officer's head snapped around. And that's when the clock really started. Because what happened over the next 7 minutes, from the moment that officer turned his head to look where I was pointing, to the moment the palace gates came down and the whole of central London locked itself shut like a fist. That's the part I still can't believe I lived through. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you about those 7 minutes properly, because every single one of them mattered, and because of what the guard did next, after they let him up, after everyone realized what they'd done to him. He wasn't finished, not even close. People always ask me how long the whole thing took, and when I tell them, they don't believe me. 7 minutes. From the second I pointed and screamed, to the second the whole heart of London snapped shut, 7 minutes. I've timed it against the footage since. 7 minutes and about 40 seconds if you want me to be exact, though the official report rounds it to 7. And I know that sounds impossible. It sounds like nothing. You spend 7 minutes waiting for a kettle to boil and you barely notice it pass. But I'm telling you, those 7 minutes had more life crammed into them than whole years I've lived. I remember them in pieces, like photographs somebody flipped through too fast. And some of those pictures I'd give anything to forget, and some I'd never trade for the world. Let me give them to you the way I lived them. Minute by minute, as close as I can get, the armed officer I'd screamed at, I learned his name later, but I'll get to that. His head came around toward me, and for the shortest beat his eyes did this thing where they checked me out completely. Top to bottom, threat or not. You could see it happen, the training again. Everybody was a maybe to him. Then he followed my arm, tracked it out to the trees. And I watched him see the man. I'll never forget his face changing. It wasn't panic. These men don't do panic, I don't think they're built for it, or it gets trained out of them. It was more like a door opening. A switch. He keyed his radio with one hand without lowering his weapon, and he said something fast and clipped that I couldn't make out, and then two of them peeled off the pile around the guard and started moving toward the trees in that low, fast, sideways run, and the whole shape of the thing changed in front of me. Up to that second, all the force had been pointed the wrong way, pointed at a man in a red coat in the dirt. Now it swung, like a searchlight finding the real target, and I felt this surge in my chest, this stupid pride, like I'd done something, like I'd helped, and then immediately under it came the cold, because if I'd helped, that meant the danger was real, and if the danger was real, then that backpack by the trash bin was exactly what I was afraid it was. I looked at the bag. I shouldn't have. I know that now. You're supposed to get away from it, not look at it. But I looked, and I thought about how close we'd been standing to it, and how Marie had wanted ice cream, and we'd almost gone to the cart that was even closer to it, and my legs just about went out from under me. Minute 2. They let the guard up. This part I saw clear as anything because it was right in front of me, maybe 20 feet. One of the officers, the one who'd taken him down, the one who'd hit him at a full run, got his hands off the back of the guard's neck, and I watched the exact moment he realized what he'd done. The red tunic, half torn open, yeah, hanging off one shoulder, but unmistakable now that the man wasn't a blur. The white belt, the black trousers with the stripe, and the guard's face when they turned him over, younger than I'd thought from a distance. He had a cut over one eyebrow from the gravel, bleeding into his eye, and dirt ground into one cheek, and he was breathing like a bellows. The officer who'd taken him down said one word. I heard it. He said, "Guard," just that, like the bottom dropped out of his stomach, like the worst word in the world. And here's what I keep coming back to. The guard didn't curse him, didn't swing at him, didn't even seem angry. The officer started to say something, sorry, or oh God, or some beginning of the thing you'd say, and the guard cut him off. Grabbed the front of the officer's gear, pulled himself half up, and said, fast, right into his face. "Forget it, he's mine. The bag's live," I watched him set it. "Get your cordon up, go." He'd been face down in the dirt 30 seconds before, and he was already giving orders. Not because anybody put him in charge. Just because somebody had to, and he was the one who'd seen the whole thing from the start, and there wasn't time to sort out who outranked who. The officer went, got up, got on his radio, started moving people back, and the guard, bleeding, half his uniform hanging off, got to his knees, then his feet, and he was swaying. You could see he was dizzy, and he looked around once for his rifle. Found it on the gravel a few yards off. Didn't go for it. Left it. I think he made a decision in that half-second that a rifle in a panicking crowd was the last thing anybody needed. Then he turned toward the trees, toward where the man had gone, toward where the two armed officers were already disappearing. And he ran after them. I want to say that again so it lands. A man who'd just been tackled by his own side, who had a head wound and was so dizzy he could barely stand, who had every right in the world to sit down in the grass and let somebody else carry it, that man got up and ran toward the danger, unarmed, in a torn coat, because the job wasn't done. Marie said behind me very quietly, "He's going to die." I didn't answer her. I didn't have an answer. Minute 3. This is where the noise started. Not the bomb, not yet. The other noise, the city waking up to itself. Sirens. First one far off, that long rising wail. Then another from a different direction, and another, and within seconds it was like the whole of London was screaming from every street at once, this wall of sound closing in from every side. I'd never heard anything like it. It came from the north and the east and somewhere down toward the river all at once, and you could feel it as much as hear it, this pressure, this sense of an enormous machine grinding into motion. And the crowd, which had scattered loose, now started to move with purpose because the armed officers and the police community officers and a couple of plainclothes people who'd appeared out of nowhere were herding everybody, shouting it. Back. Keep moving. Away from the park. Don't run, keep moving, that's it this way. There's a particular sound a few thousand frightened people make. It's not screaming mostly. It's lower than that. It's a kind of moan with feet in it. Shoes on gravel and grass, bags banging against legs, somebody's kid crying, an old woman saying, "What is it? What is it? What is it?" on a loop. A man near me kept apologizing to everybody he bumped into. Sorry, sorry, sorry. Like manners were the only thing he had left to hold on to. Marie and I got swept up in it. I didn't want to go. I wanted to see what happened to the guard. But you can't fight a crowd like that. You just can't. It's like fighting the ocean. And Marie had my hand in both of hers and she was pulling. And the right thing, the only sane thing, was to go with it. So we went. And I kept twisting my head back, trying to keep eyes on that flash of red moving through the trees, and losing it and finding it and losing it. Minute 4. I lost the guard in the trees. And for about 30 seconds I thought that was the end of what I'd ever know about it, that we'd be herded out and read the rest in the news like everybody else. Then I saw it from a distance, through a gap in the plane trees, across maybe 100 yards of open grass that the crowd had cleared out of. The man in the dark jacket had stopped running. I don't know why. The report says later he realized he was cut off, that the 2 armed officers had gotten ahead of him somehow, looped around, and he'd run himself into a corner where the park fence met a service gate. He had nowhere left to go, and so he'd stopped with his back to the fence and he'd turned around to face them. And he had his hand inside his jacket again. I couldn't hear what was being said from where I was. Too far, too much sirens and crowd, but I could see the shapes of it. The 2 officers, weapons up, spread wide, one shouting, you could see his whole body shout, that's the only way I can put it. And the man against the fence, one hand up, one hand inside his coat. Frozen. The whole thing frozen, like the guard at his post had been frozen, except this was the opposite of peace. This was a held breath that everybody knew was going to break. And then I saw the red coat come out of the trees. The guard. He came out behind the man, behind him. The man was facing the 2 armed officers and never saw the guard come up on his blind side, slow now, not running, careful, placing each foot, the way you'd move toward a sleeping dog you weren't sure about. The 2 officers must have seen the guard. They didn't react, didn't look at him, kept the man's attention pinned on them with their shouting. They were buying him the approach. The 3 of them were doing something together without a word, just bodies and timing. And it was the most coordinated, terrible, beautiful thing I've ever watched. The guard got within a few feet of the man's back. And then everything I was looking at went white. Minute 5. I didn't hear the bomb, that's the thing nobody tells you. I've talked to other people who were closer than me and they say the same, you don't hear it the way you think. It's not a boom. It's a thing that happens to you, not a sound you receive. It was like the air got slapped. Like the whole world flinched. There was a pressure that hit me in the chest and the gut and pushed, physically pushed, and a flash off to my left where the trash bin had been, and then a half-second of total silence where my ears just refused to work, and then the screaming came back all at once, and it was much, much worse than before. The backpack, the one by the trash bin, the one we'd stood next to, it went off where it sat, back in the part of the park we'd been herded away from. Whatever the man had done, whatever timer or trigger he'd set when he came back for it, it went off late, or it went off when he thumbed something in his coat. The report was never totally clear. Even afterward they couldn't say for sure, but it went off, and it went off in a part of the park that, thank God, thank God, thank God, the police had managed to clear in those few minutes. Because of the guard. Because he came off his post early. Because he started the clock before anyone else even knew there was a clock. Those minutes the cordon used to push everyone back, those were minutes he'd bought, back when he was the only one who knew, standing still and radioing it in, and then sprinting when the man came back. The bomb went off in an empty stretch of grass where, an hour earlier, there'd been a line for ice cream wrapped around twice. People still got hurt. I won't pretend they didn't. The blast threw debris, and there were people not far enough back, and some of them I saw later being carried, and I won't describe that part because it's not mine to put in a story. But what I will say is this. Every expert who looked at it afterwards said the same thing. If that bag had gone off when the man first set it down, in the middle of a packed summer crowd by the trees, near the cart, the number would not have been the number it was. It would have been a number this country still says in a hushed voice. It wasn't because of 7 minutes. And those 7 minutes started with one young man in a hot red coat deciding that what he was seeing was wrong, and not waiting for permission to be sure. Minute 6. When the white went out of my eyes and the world came back, I was on the ground. I don't remember going down. The pressure must have put me there, or I dove, or Marie pulled me. She says she pulled me, and I let her have it because honestly I don't know. I was on the grass with my ears ringing this high thin note and my mouth tasting like a battery, and Marie was on top of me, half covering me, and her mouth was moving but I couldn't hear her. I could see her face. She was checking me. Hands all over me, the way you do, looking for blood, for the wrong angle of a limb, for the thing that means it's bad. She found nothing. We were far enough back. We were lucky in a way that I will spend the rest of my life trying to deserve. I got up onto my elbows and I looked back toward the fence, toward where the guard had been, toward where the white light had not been. The bomb was behind us, at the bin. The guard and the man and the 2 officers were way off the other direction, near the service gate. And I could see them, small far, through the smoke that was starting to drift across the grass. The bomb going off had broken the frozen moment. The man at the fence, I think he flinched. Everybody flinches, even the man who said it, and in that flinch the guard moved. He didn't tackle him. He'd been tackled himself not 3 minutes before, and maybe that taught him something, or maybe it was just smarter, I don't know. He didn't go for a takedown. He came in low and fast, and he got both arms around the man's arms, pinning them, pinning the hand that was inside the coat, trapping it against the man's own body. And he didn't try to throw him down. He just held him, wrapped him up like a wrestler, and turned him. Turned the whole man so that if there was a second device, if the hand came out with something, it'd be pointed at the fence and the empty service road and not at the officers, not at the park, not at anyone. He made himself the wall again. That's the only way I can describe it. He'd spent the whole morning being a wall, a still red wall at a gate that nobody photographs. And now he made his own body the wall between the threat and everyone else, and he held on. The 2 armed officers closed the last few feet in a heartbeat. I saw them swarm the man, get the hand out, get whatever was in it away. It turned out to be the trigger. A second one. A dead man's switch is what the papers called it. The kind that goes off when you let go. Which means if they'd shot the man at the fence the way it nearly went, the whole thing could have gone again. And the guard had trapped that hand closed, held it shut, kept the man's thumb pressed down on it by sheer grip until the officers could get it secured. He didn't let go until they told him to. The report has it. The officers had to tell him twice that they had it, that he could release. He'd locked up so tight, holding that switch closed, that his hands didn't want to open. Minute 7. And then somewhere in the city I couldn't see, the gates came down. That's the phrase everybody used afterward, and I always pictured one big gate, but it wasn't one. It was all of them. The palace gates, the roads in and out of the whole central district, the tube stations, one after another, shutters coming down, bridges, the works, a protocol with a name I won't pretend to remember, the kind of thing they drill for and pray they never run, and on June 28th they ran it, and the heart of London locked itself shut from the inside in a matter of minutes. I didn't see the gates. I want to be honest about that. I'm a tourist who got knocked on the grass. I didn't see the palace or the bridges or any of the famous shots you've seen. What I saw was the park, smoke drifting, people sitting on the grass in shock, just sitting, hundreds of them, like the world's saddest picnic. Officers everywhere now, dozens, hundreds more pouring in. A helicopter coming in low and loud overhead. And far off by the service gate, 4 small figures in the smoke, 2 in black, one in a torn red coat, and one face down on the ground with his hands behind him, this time the right man. I watched the guard let go. I watched him step back from the man the officers were cuffing. I watched him take 2 steps, and then I watched his legs simply stop holding him. He went down, slow, folded up onto the grass like all the air had gone out of him at once, now that there was nothing left to hold up. One of the officers caught him on the way down, eased him onto his back. And I thought, and I'm not ashamed to say it, I thought, please, please don't let that be how this ends. Not after all that, not him. Marie was holding my arm so hard I had a bruise for a week. We were both watching that small red shape on the grass, 100 yards off through the smoke, with a stranger's whole life riding on whether it moved again. It moved. His hand came up, just his hand lifting off the grass, reaching for nothing, the way a man reaches when he's checking whether he's still got a body. The officer leaning over him grabbed it, held it, and the guard's hand held back. He was alive. I started crying then. Big, ugly, gulping crying, the kind I hadn't done since I was a kid, right there on the grass in a foreign country with sirens screaming from every direction and smoke in my throat. Marie too. We held on to each other and cried like 2 people at a funeral, except it wasn't a funeral, it was the opposite. It was the most alive I'd ever felt, and I didn't have a single word for any of it. 7 minutes. That's all it took to lock down London. And it had started, every second of it had started with one man who stood his post. And then, when it mattered, left it at exactly the right moment and gave everything he had, and never once spent a breath on himself. But the story doesn't end on the grass. Not for me. Because I had to find out who he was. And what happened after, what they did to him, and what they didn't do, and the thing he said weeks later that I still don't fully understand. They kept us in the park for a long time. That's something people don't think about. The thing happens in 7 minutes, but then there's the after, and the after goes on for hours, and nobody films the after because it's just hundreds of stunned people sitting on grass waiting to be told they can stand up. They moved us in stages. First into a far corner of the park, behind a line of officers, where they brought round water in those little plastic cups, and a woman in a green vest went person to person asking the same questions over and over. Are you hurt? Were you near the device? Did you see anything? When I told her I'd seen the man set the bag down, her face changed, and within 10 minutes I was being walked, with Marie, into a tent they'd thrown up, and I spent the next 2 hours being talked to by people who didn't tell me their names. I told them everything, the jacket, the sweat, the way he didn't look back, the hand inside the coat, and the guard. I kept coming back to the guard, and I could tell that by then they already knew about the guard. Because every time I said the guard came off his post early, the 2 of them across the table would glance at each other in a way that wasn't surprise. It was something closer to grief, or pride. I couldn't tell which, maybe both. I asked twice if he was okay. The second time, one of them, older guy, gray at the temples, the kind of calm that only comes from seeing the worst of things and surviving it. He looked at me for a second and then he said, off the record in a low voice, "He'll be all right. You can stop asking." I didn't realize until he said it how much I'd needed to hear it. I put my face in my hands and just breathed for a minute. Marie rubbed my back. Nobody rushed me. That's the thing I remember about those people. For all the urgency when it came to the human part, they were gentle. His name didn't come out for a while. The official stuff named him eventually. In the way these things get named, there was an investigation, an inquiry, the papers full of it for weeks. But I'm not going to use his full name here, and I'll tell you why. Because his family asked in the one statement they ever gave that he be allowed to be a soldier and not a celebrity, and I think that's the most him thing about the whole story, and I want to honor it. So I'll call him what the men who served with him called him, which came out later in one of the few interviews any of them gave. They called him Ellery. He was 23. He'd been in the army 4 years. He came from a town up north that I'd never heard of and couldn't find on a map until I went looking, a small place that I gather doesn't get its name in the papers for good reasons very often. His father had been in the army too, his grandfather. There's a photo that went round afterward, 3 generations in uniform taken at some family thing, Ellery just a kid in it, maybe 8, in a paper crown from a cracker, sitting on his grandfather's knee. That picture did something to people. It did something to me. He'd been on the ceremonial posting for about 8 months, the guarding the palace thing. And here's a detail I found out that I think about all the time. The men who do that posting, the standing still for tourists thing, a lot of them privately can't stand it. It's boring and it's hot and it's hard on the body and people are constantly trying to make you flinch. Ellery had apparently complained about it mildly to his mates. Said he joined to do something, not to be a photo prop. Said the worst part was that nothing ever happened. Something happened. And when it did, the photo prop, the bored kid in the hot coat who joined to do something, was the only person in a park of thousands who saw it coming and acted and didn't stop until it was over. I think about that a lot, about all the days he stood there thinking nothing would ever happen, about how the standing still was the training too, even when it felt like nothing, about how you don't get to choose the day you find out what you're made of. You just have to already be made of it when the day comes. Now I have to tell you about the officer. The one who took him down. The armed officer who hit Ellery at a dead run and put him face first into the gravel, who said that one word, guard, like the bottom dropped out of the world. His name I really don't know, not even the version the men used. He stayed out of all of it deliberately, and I respect that. But there was a part of the inquiry that came out, and it's the part I can't stop turning over, because it's the part that's about being a person and not about being a hero. They cleared him. Of course they did. Anybody who looked at it for 30 seconds could see why he did what he did. A man running full speed toward a possible device, carrying a rifle, half out of uniform, screaming in the middle of a live counter-terror response. The officer had a fraction of a second and incomplete information, and he made the call the training demanded. If he'd hesitated and it had been a threat, people would have died. He did everything right. The inquiry said so in plain words. It didn't matter, not to him. There's a line in the testimony, it's public, you can find it, where the officer is asked how he's coping, and he says, and I'm putting it in my own words because I won't pretend to quote a man's worst moment word for word. He says that the thing that haunts him isn't that he nearly shot an innocent man. It's that he nearly shot that man. The one who'd already done more than any of them. The one who was running toward the danger they were all running toward, just from a different direction. He says he replays the half-second where he made the decision, and he understands the decision, and he'd make it again with the same information, and none of that helps him sleep. And then there's the part that breaks me. Because Ellery found out the officer was struggling, that he was carrying it, that clearing him on paper hadn't cleared him on the inside. And Ellery, who'd been the one face down in the dirt with a knee on his neck, who'd been the one with every right to be angry, Ellery asked to meet him. They met privately. We only know it happened because Ellery's family confirmed it years later in passing, and they never said what was said. But I think about that room, the man who took him down and the man he took down, sitting across from each other, both of them carrying the same 7 minutes in different ways. And whatever Ellery said to him in that room, I'd give a lot to know it, because the officer went back to work, stayed on the unit, is, as far as anyone knows, still doing the job, still standing between people and the worst day of their lives. Whatever Ellery gave him in that room, it was enough to let him keep going. I think it was probably something simple. I think it was probably some version of what he'd been saying with his whole life, from the post to the gravel to the fence. Forget about you. The job's the thing. We're all just trying to get everybody home. I think Ellery understood, better than most people ever will, that the man who took him down had been doing exactly what Ellery himself had been doing, trying to protect strangers, with no time and bad information and his whole heart in it. How do you stay angry at that? They were the same. They'd just been pointed at each other for one terrible second by the fog of it. I don't know if I could do what Ellery did in that room. I'd like to think I could. I'm not sure I could. Here's the part of the story that's just mine. You can skip it if you came for the action, but I think it belongs. Marie and I flew home 4 days later when they finally let the airports run normal again. We didn't talk much on the flight. We held hands the whole way, which we hadn't done flying out, and somewhere over the Atlantic she fell asleep on my shoulder, and I sat there in the dark with the little reading light on, not reading, just feeling her breathe. We'd come to London to find out if our marriage was going to be saved or buried, and I want to tell you that the bomb fixed us, that brushing up against death made us appreciate each other, that there was some neat lesson. It wasn't that clean. Real things never are. But here's what did happen. For a year before that trip, every fight we had was about the same thing underneath. It was about who was going to flinch first, who was going to break the standoff and admit they were scared, that they were lonely, that they didn't want to lose the other one. We'd both been standing there like guards at a post, frozen, hot, miserable, each waiting for the other to move first, each too proud to break the line. And nothing ever happened, and we told ourselves the nothing was peace, but it wasn't peace. It was just two people being walls at each other. After the park, I couldn't do it anymore. The standoff. I'd seen what it looks like when somebody actually comes off the post at the right moment and gives everything, and I'd seen what it costs to wait too long, and I couldn't pretend the nothing was peace. 3 weeks after we got home, I told Marie everything I'd been too proud to say for a year. All of it. Ugly and scared and out loud. She cried, then she told me hers. We're still together. 11 years now if you count from the start, 3 since the park. We have a daughter, and I'll tell you something I've never told anybody, not even Marie until recently. When she was born and they put her in my arms and asked if we'd settled on a name. We had a girl's name picked out. We'd had it for months. But in that moment I thought about a young man in a torn red coat, face down in the gravel, spending the only seconds he had on 3 words that weren't about himself, and I couldn't help it. I thought about what it means to stand your post, and to know when to leave it, and I almost said something. I didn't. We gave our daughter the name we'd planned, and it's a good name, and I've never regretted it. But sometimes, when she's standing very still, kids can do that, go completely still when they're concentrating on something. Sometimes she gets this look, this set to her little face, and for half a second I see a sentry box and a hot summer gate, and I have to go in the other room. I went back to London last year, by myself. Marie understood. She always understands the things I can't explain. I went to the park. It's just a park again. That's the thing that gets you. Grass and joggers and an ice cream cart with a line wrapped around twice and the big plane trees peeling out of their old coats. Kids, old couples sharing a newspaper. You'd never know. There's a small marker, if you know where to look, set into the ground near where the bin used to be, nothing dramatic. You'd walk past it, most people do. I stood by it for a while. A jogger went by and gave me a funny look. This American standing still in the middle of the path with his eyes closed. Then I walked over to the gate, the working gate, the one with the sentry box that needed a coat of paint. It had a coat of paint now, and there was a guard there. A different one, obviously younger probably than Ellery had been, I couldn't tell under the bearskin. Red coat, white belt, rifle against the shoulder, standing perfectly, impossibly still in the heat, while a kid made faces at him and a dozen tourists held up their phones. I stood across from him for a long time, long enough that he probably clocked me the way Ellery had clocked the man with the bag, long enough to be one of the things he was quietly keeping track of without ever moving his eyes. I didn't make a face. I didn't take a picture. I just stood there, and I looked at this stranger doing the loneliest job in the world, the standing still job, the photo prop job, the nothing ever happens job. And I thought about how Marie, all those years ago over cold eggs, had said they can't be human. Nobody can stand that still. She was wrong. That's the whole thing. That's everything I learned in 7 minutes in a park. They are human. That's exactly what they are. The stillness isn't the absence of a person. It's a person holding so much, so carefully, so completely, that from the outside it looks like nothing at all. Every one of them is somebody's kid. Somebody who joined to do something. Somebody standing in the heat thinking nothing will ever happen, getting ready without knowing it for the day it does. I wanted to say something to the guard at the gate. Thank you, maybe. Or just, I know, I saw what one of you did. I know what you're carrying under there. But you don't break their line. You don't make them move. That's the one thing the whole world seems to understand without being told. The unspoken deal will laugh and point and try to make you flinch. But underneath it we all know, that you're standing there so we don't have to. So I didn't say anything. I just took my hat off, a stupid baseball cap, Ohio team, nothing. I took it off and held it a second, the way you do at the things you take your hat off for. The guard didn't move. Of course he didn't. But I'd like to think he understood it, the way Ellery understood that man across the table in that room, the way you can understand a whole person without a single word passing. Then I put my hat back on and I walked out of the park and back into the loud, living, ordinary city, where the gates were open and the bridges were full and nobody was screaming. And every bit of that ordinariness was a gift handed down from people who stand very still so the rest of us can move. I still don't sleep right. I told you that at the start. 3 years and my body still goes cold at odd hours, remembering the 1 second before the world went loud. But I've made my peace with the cold, because I figured out what it is finally. It's not fear. It's not even memory exactly. It's a kind of standing my post, a small one, the least anybody could do. Lying there in the dark, keeping watch over the people I love while they sleep, holding still and holding on, the way somebody once held still and held on for me, in a park full of strangers on a hot day in June. Nothing ever happens most nights. I lie there and the house is quiet and my wife breathes beside me, and down the hall my daughter sleeps with that little still concentrating face. Nothing ever happens. And I've learned that's the whole point. That's not the boring part. That's the thing he was protecting. The nothing. The ordinary, miraculous nothing. So I keep watch over it. And I think about a kid in a red coat who taught me what it means to stand your post. And when the moment finally comes, to know exactly when to leave it.